All right, everybody. It's so nice to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to watch this short video on what the title and escrow process is like. And I've invited my friend Olivia from Producers Title in West Palm Beach area, serving, I'm sure, all Palm Beach County, I would imagine, right, Olivia?
Yes, actually all of Florida.
All of Florida, in fact. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, so a little bit from my experience about Producers Title is, I've worked with a bunch of title companies in the area, and when I worked with these guys last time, it was the best experience I've had so far. So when I thought of who to ask to kind of get clarity, like straight from the source, I thought about these guys, and so I just want to thank Olivia. She's taking time out of her day on a Sunday to chat with us. So anyway, so this is Olivia, and so Olivia, tell us a little bit about your company and your team, and like for example, like who are your founders? Like how'd you get into the business? How long has it been around? Like a little brief intro.
Cool. So actually, Producers Title has been in inception since 2003. It was actually owned by a prior business partner of my husband's, and my husband bought it from him in 2011, I believe. Yes, it was 2011, and he kind of had it on the side as a side business that was just running itself. And in 2017, he and I jumped in. We saw a little bit more opportunity for growth if we were a little more hands-on, and that's been our story ever since. And we're both in real estate. I mean, I've been in real estate in one form or another since 2008.
Okay.
He's actually been in real estate since high school. So combined, we almost have, I think this year we'll have 40 years experience.
That's great. That's great. You guys are both lawyers, right?
He's actually not an attorney. I am a Florida attorney, but he's been involved in, he used to be a general contractor and actually briefly was an agent and then transitioned into the title agent world. So
Gotcha. Okay, well, that being said, like what so what are some of the services that the Producers Title offers? Because I know since you are a lawyer, it's probably not just title and escrow. I imagine it's other things too.
I'm actually primarily focused in just real estate transactions. I try to focus on just one area at a time and not venture out. I think to me, I would lose a lot of quality of work that way. So I just try to stay principally focused in real estate transactions. We do hold escrow. Obviously, we do handle closings. We issue title insurance. Not only for purchase transactions either. I don't think we're going to see a ton of refinances in the near future, but we do that as well for closings on that side.
Okay, okay. And then if you could just kind of briefly walk us through like what is title insurance? What are some things that it covers? What are some things that it does not cover?
That's a good question. So it's kind of the reverse of all other insurances. So like homeowners insurance, you buy and insures you for future events. So if your house burns down, that won't happen. But if it were to, it would be a future event. Title insurance covers everything in the past. So when we do title searches and lien searches and estoppel searches, we're doing our due diligence to make sure at the time the buyer acquires the property, there shouldn't be any issues from prior owners or liens, anything prior to the closing date. But if that occurs, now the new owner is insured for everything up to the time he owns the property. Now, if he goes and does things that create liens against the property, that's on the new buyer.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I do have some experience with this. My neighbor put their home on the market, and it went into contract, and we've gotten to know the people that have moved in there. So now it has not closed yet, and I asked them why. I'm like, why has this house not closed yet? And I learned that there's, I guess, a lien on the property. And I'm going to guess that the person who's selling the house, the person who purchased it the last time, probably skimped on getting title insurance because the lien is not on him. It's on the property from a prior owner. And then that prior owner is in prison now. And so this poor property's in limbo. And it's like, I couldn't help but think, like, what a classic example of, like, more times than not, you don't, title insurance won't come into play. But it's those types of instances where it's like, well, you find out later on your house is encumbered, and then gets difficult for you to to pass it on. So that's my kind of personal experience with it. I definitely recommend it. So what does a title insurance policy generally cost these days?
Good question. So I think I just looked up the median home sales price on Palm Beach is 525 from October. Does that sound about right?
I haven't run them for October yet, but you're probably in the ballpark. Yeah.
Okay, so that runs, title insurance runs 2,700 on a piece of property, that amount. So kind of like you said, you're putting this $500,000 investment, and you could have lien problems, so many other issues if you don't get that title insurance. And it's a one-time fee, which in Palm Beach County for the buyers, it's normally paid by the seller. So
Yes.
to me, it's a no-brainer at that point for that fraction of a cost for those off chances that you do need it. I think you gave a great example about a prior lien being in place. Those are tricky to get, to deal with, especially from prior owners. The other thing I think we're seeing significantly on the rise is fraudsters impersonating current property owners through the use of fraudulent IDs.
I have read articles about that. Yes.
And it does happen. I actually got approached probably about 2 months ago now by an agent that we work with. And she said, Olivia, something feels wrong about this seller. I said, okay. We talked a little bit more, and the seller was the fraudster was posing as the owner of the property with a fraudulent ID. And if that had gone through to sale, you now have a buyer. If they don't get title insurance, they're, for lack of a better word, SOL.
Yeah.
They've just paid all this money, and unbeknownst to them, it didn't go to the true owners. And now the true owners want their property back. So having title insurance would be a great example. Let's say we'll use my 525 number. If they had bought the property, normally it's vacant lots in these scams, but we'll just say property for this scenario. They are now either entitled to get the property back, or the title insurance company, if they cannot get it back for them, they're going to pay them the amount that they've paid for the property.
Yeah.
So to me, that's in today's world, it's just, you need it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where at the time you're like, oh, I probably won't need this, and statistically that's probably true, but it's on the off chance that you do actually need it, then you're gonna look back and be like, oh, what a small price to pay to just it just basically, in a nutshell, it guarantees clean title up to the point in which you purchase it, and then that way anything that happens from the time you purchase it on, I mean, that's on you anyway. But basically, when you try to sell the house next time, they're not gonna, if they happen to uncover some type of encumbrance that occurred before you owned it, then essentially that's when the title insurance kicks in and covers whatever the cost of that is. So definitely worthwhile on that. And then as far as escrow, what's an escrow fee going for these days?
Right now, actually, we don't charge to hold escrow if we're doing it as part of a closing. And we do occasionally hold rental deposits to help out the agents we work with, just kind of as a courtesy.
All right, well, that's awesome, pretty awesome. Have you ever had to deal with someone something that came up on title insurance that you had to kind of help them through? Like someone filed a claim or something like that. Have you ever had any stories like that?
We've been lucky, knock on wood, we haven't run into a claim scenario yet. But I think we do a lot of due diligence to try to avoid that. Yeah. I think probably the number one issue we run into with title insurance is prior owners where they've had a mortgage and they've paid for it through the closing, but the title company never followed up to make sure that that mortgage was satisfied in the public record. So even though the lender gets paid the money they're owed, they still have to it's a two-step process. They get the money and then they need to acknowledge it in the official records that they've been paid. Yeah. A lot of title companies, I don't think, follow up on that. And trying to track down a satisfaction from a prior owner is very tedious. We will help out with that. I do wish we didn't have to spend that amount of time though.
I imagine so. Okay, so let's see. All right, so basically, all right, so a seller, let's just say that a seller's selling their home. The seller accepts an offer. It's buyer gives an offer, seller accepts it. Now there's a contract. The contract is given to you, usually by the listing agent. Although I've been on the buyer side and I've been the one, not all agents are created equal that way, but anyway, you get the contract, and then what happens next? Like walk us through like kind of like time frames and like steps and like stuff that you have to do in order to fully execute.
So we actually enter in the contract. We have a software company we use. It's called Qualia. It's bank secured
Yeah.
software.
Works great, by the way, on the agent side.
I appreciate that, and most importantly, it keeps clients' information secure. So it's a great tool that we like to use, and it also gives us timelines based on certain dates. So there's like the contract entry date, and then obviously the close date is really important to meet those deadlines. And once we enter it into our portal, a lot of our due dates for tasks are based on that closing date to make sure that we can facilitate closing on time. And those things, we order a title search. We always order a title search right away, and that checks for liens would be a good example, among other things, just chain of title. And it goes through really a list of items that we need on our side, on the title side, to clear in order to close.
And how long does that usually take?
Usually we turnaround time on that's about 5 days, 5 business days, if not sooner.
Okay.
So it's pretty quick. We can order it as a rush on an as needed basis. Lien searches and estoppels, I generally like to say, are about 2.5 weeks.
I think because it varies by source, right?
Right. It varies. Yeah, it varies by source, and also, so some municipalities in Palm Beach County, I think City of West Palm is a good example. You can actually pay for them to deliver their lien search report faster. So they call that a rush option. Same with estoppels, but not all municipalities and not all associations or condo associations offer that.
You're kind of at the mercy of who you're dealing with, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, usually I would say 2.5 weeks is a conservative estimate on when we get everything back.
Okay.
Including surveys.
Yeah. So. Okay. All that stuff. And then like if someone were to pay a rush fee on those things, like what does that typically cost?
Usually it's between on the estoppels, it's by statute. So it's $100 extra if they offer it. And then the municipalities, I've seen them charge as much as $200 locally.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Good to know. Okay. That's that. And then, all right. So I guess what are some of the things? So what are the things, some of the things that like the seller pays for, traditionally, or customarily, I should say, because it kind of goes region by region, but let's just say in the Palm Beach County area, what are some of the things that the seller pays, and what are some of the things that the buyer side pays in terms of like closing costs and like fees and all that kinds of stuff? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So sellers are normally paying for title insurance in Palm Beach County. That's pretty customary. Like you said, it does vary region by region. So for instance, Broward and Dade County, it's the opposite.
Yeah, I'm also licensed in California and in Santa Cruz County, where I still practice, it's split 50-50, which I think is actually kind of fair personally, but.
No, I'm with you. It's weird. To me, it's a little weird how we do it in Palm Beach County, but that's, a lot of real estate, it's based in tradition. And I think they stick with the tradition that seller pays in Palm Beach.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, everything is negotiable. Just for people listening out there, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to do it. I mean, almost all points of the contract are fairly negotiable. So it just depends on the situation, how much leverage you have in that situation to split those costs. Say if you're the seller and you do want the buyer to absorb it, I mean, it really depends on how badly they want it. If they want it badly enough, they're going to be more apt to split it or maybe even cover it. But on the other hand, if the market's kind of cooling down like it is now, and you might not have so much demand, they might not be as apt to want to kick in for that. So that's kind of one of those things but in a hot market, I would say as a seller, you could certainly, negotiate to have the buyer's side pay that. So, little footnote there. And
Yeah, I think it's something too to keep in mind that when you are, we talked about the cost of title insurance. I mean, on a medium-sized priced home in Palm Beach County, you're looking at a couple grand. There's a lot of peace of mind though that comes with getting to work with the vendors you want to work with.
Right.
On the seller's side, or the buy side. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes not just thinking about it as, oh, I've got to pay this cost, about thinking about what time is this going to save me? Who do I have on my side who's handling the closing,
Right.
where I don't have to worry, is also something you kind of got to weigh into.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say though, from the seller's perspective, I mean, because, typically, I would say 99 times out of 100, the seller is going to pick the title and escrow, for also known as like the closer, right? And that's a great benefit to the seller because yeah, like you said, Olivia, you get to pick who you work with, people who you can rely on, as opposed to being on the buyer side, you're just kind of stuck with whoever they've picked. And a lot of times, those agents will, there's a lot of brokerages that also own title companies and they want to refer internally for whatever reason. And monetarily, obviously, I'm sure is one of them. I don't know if they get any kickbacks or whatever. I'm not sure if that's even allowed, but they do that. And then you're just kind of stuck with their title company for better or for worse. One thing I like about, my situation is I get to pick, who I know I can work with best for in this example, it would be someone like producers because I know I can rely on them. They're friendly, things like that. I know I'm not dealing with some grumpy, stubborn person on the other end. You want people that you can work well with. So that's definitely a benefit of being a seller is you get to pick those types of things. So, okay. So as far as cash deals, what do you see as being like the quickest a cash deal could potentially close? And I recognize that you said that it really depends on, the municipality with the lien search and stuff like that. So it can vary, but I guess what's the shortest you've ever seen, and what's kind of like the typical average?
So part of my answer depends on if it's in an association or not, because if approval is required, I usually caution agents that you probably want to give a 30-day window just to get the approval, unless you know somebody in the office and you're best friends with them and they're going to deliver that approval in a week. With that being said,
be very glacial.
So that's where I guess there's always it depends in lawyers' answers. So
yes, of course.
We've closed as quickly as a week. Actually, my parents happen to live in downtown West Palm Beach. We did their closing a couple years ago, and it took less than a week because there was no association approval required, and we were able to get rushes on the lien search, which happens to be in City of West Palm, and the estoppel from the association. So it can be done in a week. Okay. If there's no association, I usually recommend 2 weeks. Okay. But
always on the safe side, push for 30 days ish. And then you can always close earlier if both parties agree to, essentially.
Correct.
There you go. Okay. That's usually what I tell people anyway. It's like, you obviously want to get as much time as you can. Obviously, it depends on, how competitive things are. You want to close things as quickly as possible, but, you always want to get buy-in from the lender, how quickly they can close if there's a lender involved. And then, also check in with the title just to make sure that everyone's on the same page before you're accepting a contract, before you're writing a contract as the buyer. Just some pro tips for y'all out there. And okay, so let's see. We already covered that one. So let's say, okay, I would say what would be some of the most common issues that you see come up? Particularly those that are like avoidable, either in the seller, the buyer, the seller's agent, the buyer's agent. Like what are some of the things you see come up fairly often that are totally avoidable? Like how can we make your life easier?
Well, and I appreciate you thinking of me. It's usually about we always try to go back to the client. So we want to make it easier for them. HOA approvals, I think, there are 2 things that hold up closings on our side. One is HOA approvals, And the other I would say is permits.
Okay.
Now, permits aren't technically a titling issue, but the majority of contracts we see come across our desk now contain additional language in the additional terms requiring that the sellers close out the permits. So then it does become a contractual issue. So it does have to get addressed before closing. Quick way to just address both issues, the HOA approval, get that application in as soon as you go under contract.
Mm. You know what? I always, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's one of those little hidden lines in the contract where it's like, you agree to do it in X number of days. I think the default is 5 days. But 5 days, why would you wait 5 days to start that? I mean, you're throwing away 5 days. It's just going to make it close 5 days later, potentially. So yeah, I agree. I feel like as soon as you go into contract as the seller, because that's the seller requesting that, or would you say, or I guess how does that typically work? Is it more the seller kind of letting the association know, or is it more the buyer just putting in the application to the HOA?
I would say 95% of the associations, it's the buyer submitting it right away. There are a couple of associations that do require the seller's cooperation, so they'll have to sign off on paperwork that does allow the transfer to happen. I happen to live in an association that does that, but we're in the vast minority.
Okay, well that's good to know. So basically, if you're a buyer out there and you want to streamline the process, just put your application in as soon as possible. And I would also say, as a pro tip, if you can hand deliver it, do so, because one of our rental properties that we have, we were getting some tenants in there, and we follow the directions on the instructions on, it says mail it to this address. So, I'm a by the letter kind of guy, and they did that, and it sat in their mailbox for 5 days, their post office box. And I finally am like, is this guy moving at all? And they're like, oh, well, we haven't checked the mail. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And they're like, well, you could have dropped it off. And I'm like, well, it doesn't say that in the instructions. So now I'm realizing that that it really helps to just, if you can possibly hand it off to somebody, do so. And then also communicate with your agent, hopefully that's me, to just check on the process to make sure things are moving along, because not all associations are equal. Some are very proficient and some are very much not so, and they need to be pushed a little bit, politely, of course. And okay, so I would say that's that one. I answered that one. Yeah, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think is sort of important for buyers and sellers?
For buyers and sellers, I think making a decision about your agent is a huge part of the process, because the agents are really your gateway to the vendors that are going to help facilitate your deal, and also the vetter of the vendors that you're going to be working with, because there are a lot of parties. I don't think everyone realizes that when they go into a contract.
Yeah, they have no idea how involved it is. We try to make it look easy,
Right. And I think, aligning yourself with an agent such as yourself, who is going to not only find vendors that he wants to work with, but also vet the other vendors that the buyer is proposing to work with. I think probably one of the things we see that can really affect a closing is lenders' performance on the closing deadline dates.
Right.
And when you, as the listing agent, are looking over the offers that are coming in, I think it's so crucial to be vetting not only the agent on the other side of the deal, but who are they also working with, on who's their lender that they're planning to work with, because that has impacts for the whole transaction. And you're there kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, like the captain of this ship with all these people on it trying to get to the same destination.
Yeah. You want the best possible team scenario that you can get in that, because there's a lot of moving parts. You're relying on all these different people for different things. And ideally, if the agent that you're working with, hopefully that's me, can pick the team that he or she works with best, that's generally going to work out the best. Now, hopefully that's in your best interest, not necessarily theirs or whatever company they work for. For me personally, I always put my clients first, whatever is going to be the best outcome for them. And I hope that that also is going to work out for me too. But one of the things about being a realtor is there's, part of that is that we have fiduciary responsibility to put your needs first. Unfortunately, not all agents do that, but I do take that very personally because, I've been on the other side of it before, and I want to know that that person is doing everything possible to represent my best interests. So a lot of it is like trusting and stuff like that. So yeah, good point on that one. And I'll say, final question for you is, I would say, what's like your favorite part of this job? Like, what do you like most about this industry?
Well, it's funny you mentioned trust. I think that's really probably one of the most gratifying parts of this, that people are entrusting us to not only hold funds for their closing,
Yeah.
but to do, to follow the contract and to really look out for the transaction as a whole. And the title side, we're really a neutral third party. We're not there to represent the buyer or the seller. We're there to really facilitate the transaction and make sure that it's in accordance with the contract. And I like that role. Not only also, I love the trust part, because that's obviously amazing, where people entrust you to be a part of this huge life-changing decision.
Yeah.
But I think the mediation role, I'm not a litigator by nature. So this role is very good because it's really about bringing people together where there may be a dispute or a problem along the way, but figuring out how we can, one, get it to close, but also that all parties feel like they've won and that it's successful.
Yeah. Now, what about, while I'm thinking about it, what about wire fraud? Have you come across anything involving wire fraud at all?
Great question. We have been fortunate. We have not run into that. While we are a very small office, we do have the benefit. My husband is a self-proclaimed tech nerd. So we have some of the highest levels of security and email monitoring. We rival very large title companies. That's something we take incredibly seriously. Not only the tools that we have in place on the technology standpoint, emails, and also Qualia, the secure portal we use, but also employee training is huge as far as being on alert of wire fraud, phishing emails. I don't ever want to call a client to say, we didn't receive your deposit.
Yeah. What a nightmare that would be. So I guess this is a good time to say that, if you're the person who's sending money, you always want to, if you get any type of wiring instructions, you're always going to want to independently verify those wiring instructions by, searching yourself for, producer's title, West Palm Beach, and then finding that office number, calling them, and independently saying, hey, I have these wiring instructions, is this the thing? And I imagine that, I can't remember offhand, but you guys probably only give part of the account number and you have to call for the rest of it, right?
So we give actually the full account number, but we very much vet up front that you need to call us. And you can call us 5 times in a row if you're nervous.
I'm sure you're used to it. Yeah. Better safe than sorry. So always verify those wiring instructions, because that way that it came from the people who are expecting to receive it, and not someone who intercepted that and is trying to get your life savings or whatever. So because unfortunately it does happen, and unfortunately it's never happened with producers, but it does happen occasionally. So
it's more than occasionally, unfortunately. Now it's $1 billion industry for these. Yeah, and it's very strategically done. The fraudsters, if you think you're smarter than them, they're going to get you next. Because my favorite thing when I deal with another title company or oftentimes a law firm, I'll just send it to you through email. Our email is secure. As soon as they say that, they are next on the list to get hacked. Your email is not secure. It's just like you said, once you get the phone number from an independent source, search for it online, call that number. It's a 5-minute phone call, because nobody's email is secure at this point.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And one other thing I want to say about your the software that you guys use to sort of manage the transaction. Now, that's the first time I've ever actually had someone that used something like what you guys have, and I actually love it because it's sort of like an online portal where all parties have access to it. You can send messages back and forth to each other through it. You can download documents, you can be sent documents. It's sort of like a one-stop shop for everything involving your transaction. It shows the timeline, it has people's contact information and stuff. So I love that component that you guys have it, because all the other transactions I've done up to that point, it's a very, I guess old school, relative sense of just, emailing back and forth and checking, but like, it kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of the process. Like, sometimes you just assume things are one way, but with this, you kind of get a visual sense of, what has been done, what hasn't been done. And if something hasn't been done, then you can visually see that, and you can kind of, ask your agent or ask the closer, which would be, someone on Olivia's team. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. You got anything else you want to throw in there?
No, I think that was it. You've covered everything. I'm so glad to be on. It's good to virtually see you.
I
I
know,
think we
right? I
only
know.
chatted by phone, which is how stuff is done these days.
Yeah.
I guess one last thing I will say, we do offer, I know you were saying about old school. We are trying to transition into kind of, I guess, the millennial generation of closings, and we do everything virtually as much as possible. So clients don't have to come in office. Even sellers where they need to get documents notarized can actually do it from their phone. So
Right.
instead of having to leave your work or take a day off work, you can actually do the closing 15, 20 minutes from your phone at your office. You can just take a quick break, which I think is convenient for a lot of people, especially clients where you've got a husband who works one place and a wife who works in a different location. They can get on the call, sign everything, and be done in 15, 20 minutes. So.
Yeah, because so does that eliminate the need for a mobile notary?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's a virtual notary, and it is somebody in our office who performs it. So you're able to see them and ask questions. It's not like it's a stranger.
Gotcha.
But you're avoiding that need to drive into an office.
Right. Yeah, that's sort of like face to face or whatever. And then in terms of like people who are less tech savvy, like are able to adapt to something like that, or is it better just to kind of do the mobile notary thing? What's your experience with that?
It depends. I mean, we've had people, it's a pretty user-friendly software that I think most people, we can walk them through. If not, we can always have them come in office or arrange for a mobile notary. But I think more and more as we transition into the tech age, everything is becoming less in person, and we're adapting to that. So.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you guys are keeping up with the time. We appreciate that. And so just once again, I'm just gonna give a shout out to Olivia. We're at a producer's title. She and her husband are the proprietors, right?
Yes.
Yep. And so doing a great job over there. So if you choose me as your listing agent, this is who we're going to be working with. So now you kind of get to know some of the team members, and you're also and other. This is going to be a part of a series called The Process, which essentially kind of walks people through all the different sort of components and meets some of the players and stuff. So you'll be in this. That's in the works right now. And so yeah, so it's great having you. I really appreciate everyone who stuck through this whole thing. I hope that you learned a lot. And if we didn't cover anything, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to them, and we'll get your questions answered. So thank you all very much. And we will be talking to you soon. Thanks.